Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, the what, why and how of newspaper analysis from the perspective of civil services examination. Today we have taken up the daily edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 11th of August 2022. The articles that we shall be taking up today have been displayed on the screen, and let us now begin the discussion. ED arrest 5 in Punjab in money laundering case appears as a very small news on national page. And most aspirants, especially those who do not have good understanding of the syllabus, are likely to ignore this, thinking that whatever appears on front page or on editorial is of absolute importance, the rest everything is not so important. But here they are mistaken. Money laundering, or the process of conversion of dirty money into the clean money, is a grave cause of concern for all the countries across the globe. Now if you look at the UPSC syllabus under GS paper 3, money laundering and its prevention has been given as a part of your syllabus under internal security. Because first and foremost, money laundering is generated more often than not from illicit or illegal acts. For example, drug trafficking, arms smuggling, criminal activities like extortion money. And so all these things together have direct impact on India's internal security, and the way these money laundering and the proceeds of money laundering is utilized then again become a cause for concern, because a person obtaining his or her wealth or revenue from illicit sources ultimately is going to focus upon them. And so more often than not, money laundering becomes the base for terrorist financing and organized crime networks. And that is why it is very, very important for us to understand what money laundering is, what are the processes and means to conduct money laundering, what are its impact, and what are the challenges. Now there is one very important aspect which we will not take up today, which deals with the act or the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, because it has been taken up already in the DNS. As far as previous year questions are concerned, in 2013 UPSC had asked, money laundering poses a serious security threat to a country's economic sovereignty. What is its significance for India, and what steps are required to be taken to control this menace? Then in 2018, UPSC had asked, India's proximity to two of the world's biggest illicit opium growing states has enhanced her internal security concerns. Explain the linkages between drug trafficking and other illicit activities such as gun running, money laundering and human trafficking. What countermeasures should be taken to prevent the same? So let us now begin the discussion. Starting with what actually is money laundering. So money laundering is a process that criminals use in an attempt to hide the illegal source of their income. What they basically do is that they pass their illegally obtained asset and money through complex transfers and transactions, or through a series of businesses, and in that process the money is cleaned. So the black money is made as an input, and what you have as an output is clean money, which can then be utilized just like all other clean money without any government restrictions or regulations. The word laundering comes from infamous gangster Al Capone's practice of using a chain of laundromats he owned to launder huge amounts of cash, and from there the word or the term money laundering has been derived. So as far as what is concerned, we understand it is a process of converting dirty money or money derived from illegitimate sources into clean source of money on which no objection can be raised from the government. And just to give you an example, let's say there is a person A who earns a lot of money, crores and crores of rupees from, let's say, drug trafficking. Now the obvious problem is that this person A cannot deposit this amount into his or her bank account, simply because the income tax department and the government is going to ask questions as to what is the source of the money, and the person A will not be able to explain this source of money. And so instead of directly depositing this amount into the bank, what this person A can do is that it can parallelly run a hotel of, let's say, 10 rooms, out of which on an average 3 to 4 rooms are occupied and 6 other rooms are left vacant in general. So the average revenue which this hotel is generating every day is just from 4 rooms, and 6 rooms are unoccupied. So this person A can divert this illegitimate cash and show to the government that all the 10 rooms were occupied throughout the year, and so the dirty money is mixed with the clean money, and now the revenue from the hotel can be easily deposited in the bank account as a form of revenue from a hotel, which is a legitimate source, and then it becomes a white money. So you can see that through this process, person A was able to convert the illegitimate source of money into clean money, which then can be utilized for any purpose, because now under the system, under the government radar, it is accounted as a money from the hotel or profits from the hotel business, but actually 60% of that revenue has come from illegitimate sources. So this is a very simplistic idea as to how money laundering works. So why is money laundering done? Money laundering is done for two reasons. Either the source of income is illegal or illegitimate, for example drug trafficking and various other criminal activities. But does money laundering is used by only criminals or not other people? Of course it is used by other people as well, because even if their source of income is not illegitimate, for example professionals, it could be doctors, builders, it could be businessmen, all those people who have the source of income as legitimate, but because of the high taxes or because their unwillingness to pay the taxes to the government, they do not show their full income and rather divert these incomes derived from the legitimate sources and adopt a very complex financial procedure to evade taxes. So these are the two cases where money laundering is often resorted to. Now the obvious question is how the money laundering is done, and from the perspective of civil services examination, it is important to have a brief idea about the three stages adopted in money laundering, and they are known as initial placement, then layering, and then final integration. Now in order to better understand these three steps, let us take this example through a diagram. The first step, placement, which we just discussed, is about collection of the dirty money. It is the riskiest step where launderers insert the money into formal financial channel, because after all, banks are required to report large transactions and these are huge piles of cash, and as we understood that first it will be placed. Just like the example we talked about earlier, it was all about inserting that black money into hotel revenue, making it look like it is a legitimate source of money. Then the second step is layering, which involves sending the money through various financial transactions to change its form and make it difficult to trace. So for example, bank to bank transfer, international transactions, investment into shell companies, donation to political parties, sending it to the accounts offshore, purchasing high value items. All these things are done in the second layer just to make it extremely difficult for the law enforcement agencies, for the income tax department to trace back the original source of money. And then finally, integration. Money re-enters the system and now it appears to come from legitimate sources, which is then most often than not involved in purchasing of luxury assets, property, creating trusts and receive donations through it in the future. Now there are various means to achieve money laundering. You must have heard terms like shell companies, hawala transactions, round tripping. So what does these terms actually mean? So now we understand that any kind of black money initially cannot be moved through institutional banking channels. It's impossible. You have to first place them, layer them, and then finally once it is integrated, that it can move through formal banking system without any threat. But before that, all that cash has to be moved, and that process in India is called as hawala transactions, where funds are moved between individuals, for example A to B, from one city to another, without actually physically transferring cash from place A to place B. So for example, if I have a lot of black money in Mumbai, I contact the Havaldar, that's why the name Hawala, in Mumbai, give him 1 crore rupees, and let's say if I transfer the money to Delhi, within next 5 minutes, person A is going to call person B, who is the Havaldar of Delhi, and that person is going to distribute exactly same amount in Delhi in next 5 minutes, very less amount of charge. So you can understand that this process is extremely convenient. Not only this transaction has evaded the scrutiny of the government, it has also saved a lot of tax, and it was done in 5 minutes for amount which was massive, and these amounts which Havaldar's deals can go up to thousands of crores. there is no physical transaction of cash between A and B, because when the cash is being transferred from Mumbai to Delhi, similarly there will be another person who would want to transfer the cash from Delhi to Mumbai. And so this process is extremely convenient. Then bulk cash smuggling, just like drug smuggling, carrying the huge piles of cash, which is what is caught during the times of elections in cars, in other kinds of vehicles. Then the process is round tripping, which is worth understanding, where the money leaves the country through various channels such as inflated invoices, payments to shell companies overseas, or even hawala route internationally. Then that money is invested in shell companies and other assets in foreign country, and then those assets come to India, those money come back to India as an investment from those shell companies into India's share market, and this is what is known as round tripping. So black money goes to a shell company in, let's say, Cayman Island, which is a tax haven. Now that Cayman Island company is going to invest into various companies in India, making it look like a foreign investment, but actually it is an illegitimate money obtained from operations in India. Then of course gambling, no need for me to explain. And then finally shell companies, which are businesses that have large amounts of financing but are not directly involved in any specific business enterprise selling goods or services, and that's why the name shell. They just have paperwork, they do not have any real functioning or operation, and these finances are used to invest in other businesses which are typically legitimate. Now of course money laundering has proven to be a menace for the society, economy, and there have to be proper reasons, because once illicitly earned money enters into a particular economy's financial system, it has the ability to destabilize the economic system and indirectly promote negative social and legal ills such as tax evasion, which basically means loss of revenue to the government. So as far as primary impact of money laundering on economy is concerned, tax evasion, loss of revenue to the government are the two directly we can think of. But then there are legal impacts of money laundering as well. For example, money laundering and criminal activities form a vicious cycle. The quest to legalize illicitly earned money leads to money laundering, which in turn provides the required financial boost or the initial capital for further illegal activities, as well as it incentivizes a lot of people to take up violence, to take up crime, because they have seen other people getting filthy rich as a result of money laundering. And so it threatens law and order of that particular city, country, or state. Then it has, of course, social impact as well, because money laundering is directly associated with high level of drug addiction in that particular society, because there is a lot of wealth which is unaccounted for. And so more often than not, that wealth is utilized in drug addiction, and then it leads to declining law abidance, because law abiding citizens lose the incentive, lose the motive to follow the law, because they see that all those people who are breaking the law are enjoying their lives while they are making their lives miserable by following the law. So this is a big problem. So since legal provisions related to Prevention of Money Laundering Act has already been covered, we are going to take up the challenges because of which the governments across the globe are trying to fight and control the money laundering, but they are not very effective. And one of the biggest reasons behind that is rapid advancements in digital technology. The enforcement agencies are not able to match up the speed with which the digital technology and digital financing is enabling the money launderers to obscure the origin and proceeds of crime, and especially by utilizing the cyber finance techniques. Then another important reason because of which it is becoming an increasing challenge is non-fulfillment of the purpose of Know Your Customer norms or KYC norms. Increasing competition in the market is forcing the banks to lower their guards and thus facilitate the money launderers to make illicit use of the banking transactions and channels in the process of money laundering. Because after all, banks also need businesses, they need rich, wealthy clients, and in that process, if they feel that this transaction is going to yield them some benefit, they'll lower their guards, providing an avenue for money laundering. Then the tax haven countries. They have long been associated with money laundering because their strict financial secrecy laws allows the creation of anonymous accounts while prohibiting the disclosure of financial information. And of course, last but not the least is lack of awareness. about seriousness of crimes of money laundering. The poor and illiterate people, instead of going through lengthy paperwork transaction in banks, prefer the Hawala system where there are fewer formalities, no or little documentation and lower rates and of course anonymity. Ovesi raises issues of minorities, flags the atmosphere of hate, mob lynchings. And it is not a coincidence that just today, which will appear in the newspaper tomorrow, the government of India has introduced very severe penalties for mob lynchings. And if you look at these kinds of instances in past 5 to 10 years, these cases have just risen up. There have been cases of WhatsApp lynchings where a group of people in particular village were aroused because of news or WhatsApp forwards which claimed that people have come in their villages for child abduction or organ harvesting. Then of course case of Pehlu Khan Tabriz Ansari related to cow vigilantism. No one can forget Dimapur mob lynching of 2015 where a mob of about 7,000 to 8,000 people broke into a prison, dragged a man detained under suspicion of rape out of Dimapur Central Jail, paraded him naked and beat him to death in case of vigilant justice. And so, of course, it is important from the perspective of our UPSC civil services examination because first and foremost you should realize that there is a particular pattern in which most of the cases are happening. Apart from all the ills that a mob lynching event creates, it also creates fractures in the society which then is utilized by external state and non-state actors to further widen that fissure. And hence it is important for us to understand it from the perspective of internal security. So we'll first understand what mob lynching is, what are its causes, what are its impacts, and what steps have been taken to curb the menace of mob lynching. And so let us begin by first understanding what exactly is mob lynching. And so mob lynching is basically a form of violence in which mob, which means a group of people gather at a place under the pretext of administering justice without trial. And they execute a presumed offender, often after inflicting torture and corporal mutilation. And so it is a sheer violation of the principle of rule of law. It's just the lack of order. People taking hands in their law is not what we desire as a society. And it is exactly because of this such an elaborate system of criminal jurisprudence have been created, police has been created, independent judiciary has been created. But still we are seeing increasing number of such instances where a group of people, which basically are faceless mob, they gather at a place and they immediately administer justice, which is mostly or usually in the form of death. And it is extremely problematic because instances like this first and foremost deter India's image in international arena. Image of India as a democracy is extremely tarnished because of such incidents, and hence it spreads a very negative image for the Indian society and state, that India is not able to protect the life and liberty of its citizens. Because after all, Article 21 says that life and liberty of a person can be taken away only by procedures established by law. And here the people are openly killing other people without any fear of law. Apart from that, if you look at it internally, it loosens India's social fabric. Because inevitably, most of the targets of mob lynching have come from a particular set of people, either from minority or even from Hindu society. They are coming from the marginalized sections. And since the victims of mob lynching inevitably come from selected few group of people, it always raises concern with respect to India's social fabric. It does not just end there, it has an economic component as well. An economic component is so significant because economy thrives at a place which has order, which has predictability, which has peace. And if the instances of mob lynching keep on happening at a particular place or in a particular society, it just reflects on its image as a total anarchical place. There is no order in that particular place, and hence The people would not like to invest at a place which frequently or even rarely observes mob lynching, which means people do not follow the law. And so it disrupts the functioning of the market and makes a section less confident to participate in the economy. They would not want to go out of the place where they do not have much of their own types. And so, of course, it raises concern with respect to the security as well. Rising instances of mob violence threaten internal security because mob lynching creates fractures in the society, and the state and non-state actors which want to create trouble for India or any particular society, they build upon this fracture and try to indoctrinate the youth and other people of that particular group which has been frequently subjected to the mob lynching. Apart from that, when the cases of mob lynching go unpunished, they create problem for law and order as well, because obviously it reduces the authority of the police to act, and it sows the seed of enmity which can become reason for further instability, leading a law and order problem to become a public order problem. And so it is important for us to dwell into the causes as well. So one of the leading causes of mob lynching can be attributed to the prejudices which people garner on the basis of religion as well as on the basis of caste. That this particular person belongs to this particular religion, and so he or she has to behave in that particular way. And not just that, that particular behavior is antagonistic to my own interest, and that is where the problem begins. There is no problem in treating group of people A different from group of people B, but when these two groups start to look at their interest as mutually exclusive and against each other, that's when the problem begins. And so when you look at the cases related to cow vigilantism, the killing of Pehlu Khan and Tabriz Ansari, these are mostly related to that. Then the next set of cases have been motivated because of honor killings or shame killing, which is the murder of an individual, either an outsider or a member of family, by someone seeking to protect what they see as the dignity and honor of themselves or the family. So for example, a couple from two different castes or from two different religions, when they marry, they are often killed by their near and dear ones, even their first immediate family like parents as well, because for them honor is more important than anything else in the world. And so in India, honor killings are often connected to religion, to caste, and other forms of social stratification, even in some cases to sexuality also, because they have been reported cases where people who were homosexuals were also killed. Now honor killing is just not prevalent to our country, but honor killing on the basis of caste is of course intrinsic to Indian society, because caste as an institution does not exist outside the Indian subcontinent. Apart from that, there are other reasons as well. For example, one of the culprit is our criminal justice system. Because people have felt since time long that the conviction rate from our judiciary is very, very low. And even when the convictions are finally made, it takes decades for a criminal to be announced as a culprit and not just an accused. And so this tariq pe tariq has led Indian people, in most cases belonging to rural areas, to believe that unless and until they administer justice then and there, the criminal will run free and there is no way to hold that person accountable. And so best way to serve justice is to do it instantaneously through death without trial. Also, increasing allegations of corruption against the police leads people to believe that if they do not dispense the justice then and there, police is not going to take care of the criminal and maybe release the accused on bail. And they don't realize that bail is a matter of right in most of the cases. And in recent years, social media has emerged as one of the root causes behind the mob lynchings. Because in many of the cases, as we have seen in the introduction, it was revealed that the social media posts, especially viral WhatsApp forwards, created an atmosphere of fear among the local people, because of which They decided to take law in their hand and administer justice instantaneously. And so it is important for the central as well as the state governments to take proper steps to prevent mob lynching because of its deleterious effect on society, on economy, on security, as well as India's international relations. But for that, you need to realize that police and public order are state subjects under the 7th schedule to the Constitution of India. And the responsibility to maintain law and order and protect life and property rests with the respective state governments. And so, Ministry of Home Affairs can at best issue advisory to the states and union territories from time to time to maintain law and order and ensure that any person who takes law into his or her hands is punished promptly as per law. Apart from that, Supreme Court has issued guidelines on preventing mob lynching. And so in this regard, Supreme Court has issued guidelines against mob lynching, which are basically a set of instructions for all the state governments that they shall first and foremost designate a senior police officer in each district for taking measures to prevent incidents of mob violence and lynching. Then they have to conduct vulnerability mapping, that the state government shall immediately identify such districts, subdivisions, and villages where the instances of mob lynching and mob violence have been reported in the recent past or likely to occur in future. Then apart from that, Supreme Court has said in the same guidelines that it shall be the duty of every police officer to cause a mob to disperse, which in his opinion has a tendency to cause violence in the disguise of vigilantism or otherwise. Apart from that, the central government and state government together should focus on awareness creation. The central and state government should broadcast on radio and television and other media platforms, including the official websites, that lynching and mob violence of any kind shall invite serious consequence under the law. And so you can see that if Supreme Court guidelines are clearly followed, the instances of mob lynching should decline drastically. And so, in the backdrop of rising mob lynching cases, there is a growing concern within the civil society. These concerns are compounded by the fact that due to the lack of specific law against lynching, most of the time the perpetrators get away with most heinous crime. And so now, voices in the civil society are coming together to propose a strict legislation against any such barbarism. And so National Campaign Against Mob Lynching released a draft law known as Manav Suraksha Kanun, or acronymed as MASUKA, which has laid the grounds for first defining what mob lynching is. And as per the law, lynching should be made a non-bailable offense, which means that bail should not be exercised as a matter of right. Apart from that, if in a particular area mob lynching has taken place, the station house officer should be immediately suspended, because the station house officer should know that there is such an activity going on and should immediately respond. And if particular SHO has not been able to respond, that person should not hold the office of SHO. And finally, it prescribes life imprisonment for those convicted under mob lynching. Apart from that, states like Rajasthan, Manipur and West Bengal have enacted their own law against mob lynching. NDA-LI Mizo National Front backs no trust motion. So the Mizo National Front, or MNF, an NDA partner and the ruling party in Mizoram, backed the no confidence motion moved by the opposition alliance in parliament against the BJP-led government at the center. And the main contention was that because center has not been handling Manipur situation and the push for uniform civil code. Now, uniform civil code, or the formulation of one law to be made applicable to all religious community in matters such as marriage, divorce, inheritance and adoption, is a burning issue for Indians and especially for politicians. Now, it is a proposal in India to formulate and implement personal laws of citizens which apply on all citizens equally regardless of their religion, sex, gender and sexual orientation. Now currently, personal laws of various communities are governed by their religious scriptures. And it is an important issue regarding secularism in Indian politics and continues to remain disputed by India's political parties. Apart from being politically sensitive issue, there are certain things which are extremely important from the perspective of civil services examination. And at the base of the issue lies conflicts upon very essential properties and values of our constitution. For example, the call for uniform civil code has to be seen in the perspective of Article 44, which is directive principle of state policy, and Article 25, which happens to be fundamental rights. And since the beginning, it has been extremely difficult task for our parliament to maintain the right kind of balance between DPSP and FR. Apart from that, how we trade on this matter will decide a right balance between national integrity and preservation of the diversity and the rights of the minorities. And so accordingly, this topic directly does not fit in any particular part of the syllabus. It could go well in GS paper 1 in Indian society part. It could as well be asked in GS paper 2, and it has been asked in 2015. Discuss the possible factors that inhibit India from enacting for its citizens a uniform civil code as provided for in directive principle of the state policy. And so in this regard, what we are going to do is that first we will understand what uniform civil code exactly stands for. Then what are the arguments which totally calls for and makes it a much desirable project for the parliament. At the same time, we also have to understand the inherent issues or the problems it might be associated with. So from this perspective, we will begin the discussion, starting with understanding the Uniform Civil Code itself. So as you can understand, code means a law. Civil means a law dealing with civil matters. Civil matters means private laws related to property, family, obligations, which are basically not criminal in nature. And uniform means a civil code which is applicable to all the communities and all the people in our country. Now you would ask, is it not uniform for everyone? And so the answer is absolutely yes. Right now, the private matters of each individual related to marriage, divorce, adoption, inheritance is governed by their own personal laws or in religious laws. And so as you can see on the screen, there are a lot of laws depending upon which particular community you belong to. And so, Uniform Civil Code is intended to replace this multiple and fragmented personal laws which currently govern interpersonal relationships and related matters within different religious communities with a single law which will be applicable to all the citizens of our country in their personal matters. Now this transition might seem very easy for parliament to do, but this is one of the most hotly debated topic in India's parliament and politics. Now whenever we look into a law, we have to look at its constitutional backing. And in case of Uniform Civil Code, the backing directly comes from Constitution of India under Article 44, which is a part of Directive Principle of State Policy, which lays down that the state shall endeavour to secure a uniform civil code for the citizens throughout the territory of India. So you can see, first and foremost, the most valid argument in favour of Uniform Civil Code lies in the Constitution of India, which makes it obligatory or duty in that sense on Parliament to enact Uniform Civil Code. And so one might ask, what is the problem? When Constitution mandates the state to do something, it has to do that. And so rest of the debate comes from there. It's not about enactment of Uniform Civil Code, but how you are going to enact the code and what provisions will it contain. Will it have any scope for adjusting for local and regional variations throughout our country which just does not exist among various religions but within a community? Will the Uniform Civil Code finally take the look of majority religion? And so there are a lot of questions which still remain with respect to Uniform Civil Code. And so when we talk about legislation, the proponents of Uniform Civil Code state and give reference to many judicial pronouncements. For example, Shah Bano case, Sarla Mudgal case of higher judiciary, which have clearly called for Uniform Civil Code. And they have clearly stated that Parliament has the right and should make laws with respect to Uniform Civil Code. But at the same time, the opponents of Uniform Civil Code state that personal laws within double codes are mentioned in the concurrent list of Schedule 7, which means they list 3 of Schedule 7. And so, although the Parliament has the power to enact laws on concurrent list, but at the same time, we know that the entries in concurrent list are those matters which require regional modifications, and that is why simultaneously power has been given to both Parliament and legislature. The critics argue that if framers of constitution had intended to have a uniform civil code across the country, they would have given exclusive jurisdiction to Parliament in respect of personal laws by including this subject in the union list. And so, this matter would be best served at the state legislature level. All the legislatures should come up with their own codes for civil matters, shall they think it fit. So this is the issue number one on which the debate is between the proponents and opponents. The second matter on which the debate is about how the application of Uniform Civil Code might collide with fundamental rights or might enable fundamental right at the same time. For example, a lot of proponents argue that it is essential for gender justice to have a uniform civil code. They argue that most personal laws have been directly copy-pasted from religious textbooks. These religious or customary personal laws are inherently biased in favor of men and against women, and that's true. At the same time, they argue that religion and personal laws are different avenues. For example, in the landmark S.R. Bommai versus Union of India, the Apex Court had upheld that religion is the matter of individual faith and cannot be mixed with secular activities, and secular activities can be regulated by the state by enacting a law. But on the other hand, if you look at fundamental rights, we know that secular state should not interfere with the personal laws. A uniform civil code is seen by many as a contradiction to fundamental rights guaranteed under Article 25, which is individual's fundamental right to religion, Article 26 Clause B, which is right to each religious denomination to manage its own affairs within courts in matters of religion, and Article 29, right to conserve distinctive culture. And so after the issue of legislative competence, fundamental rights, comes the issue of country's diversity. Because the proponents believe that promulgation of Uniform Civil Code is going to promote national integration and sense of oneness in the citizens of our country. Because they believe that different laws for different religious groups breed communalism. And instead of that, single secular law governing various aspects of personal matters would arouse a sense of oneness and national spirit. At the same time, opponents have equally compelling arguments. They say that instead of promoting national integration, the Uniform Civil Code is in fact against the diversity of our country, and to start with, we do not have national consensus on any such law. Because there has been skepticism whether there could ever be uniformity of personal laws in democratic and diverse country like India. Forget about multiple religions like Hindus, Muslims, Sikhs and Christianity and various other. Just take any particular religion, for example Hinduism. Hinduism itself offers a lot of diversity which has to be accommodated within the personal laws. And so instead of hurrying for the Uniform Civil Code, what government should right now focus upon, or the parliament first should create a national consensus as to what and to how much extent this uniformity is even feasible and more than that desirable. And then finally, the argument about simplification. The proponents argue that Uniform Civil Code is going to simplify laws that are segregated at present based on religious beliefs. Same civil law will then be applicable to all citizens irrespective of their faiths. But at the same time, opponents argue that Indian laws do follow a uniform civil code in most civil matters like Indian Contract Act, Code of Civil Procedure, Sale of Goods Act. Even these uniform laws, which deal with other civil matters of our citizens, have been amended multiple number of times and now they have become very diverse. And so even in the matters where uniformity exists, there's a space for diversity. And so this idea of simplifying the civil matters into one law or codifying the laws into single law does not hold true. Because recently several states refused to be governed by Uniform Motor Vehicles Act, which has nothing to do with religion or dealing into personal matters. Collegium proposes transfer of Gujarat High Court judge to Patna. So the Supreme Court Collegium has recommended the transfer of Gujarat High Court Judge Justice H.M. Prachak to Patna High Court for better administration of justice. Now, as all of us know, that appointment to higher judiciary is a very, very important topic from the civil services prelims as well as mains perspective. In this regard, we have already done the discussion before, and so we are going to repeat that discussion because nothing has changed since then. Now, whenever we talk about judicial and higher judicial appointments or appointment to these constitutional posts, why are we so worried about these appointments? Now, we are worried about these appointments because the way these judges are appointed decides the independence of the judiciary. Now, if you've gone through even the most basic of the text of NCERT, you know the Constitution of India has taken a great care to ensure the independence of judiciary. Let us know in the comment section what are some of the provisions through which the Constitution has ensured the independence of judiciary. Now, why is independence of judiciary so important? Now, independence of judiciary, especially in a democracy like India, is very, very important because first and foremost, you need to maintain public confidence in the judiciary. That public confidence will come only when judiciary will be seen as independence. Then, if you want to uphold rule of law, you have to be independent because more often than not, threats to rule of law come from government. And then, if you want to protect individual rights, fundamental rights and liberties, which again are generally threatened by the government and its actions, you will have to be independent. An appointment is one of the ways through which either the independence can be gained or it can be lost if we are talking about judiciary. Because if the appointment procedure is dominated by the government or executive, many people say that higher judiciary will also become like another ministry or an attaché of a government. And so that is why the first article which deals with judiciary, higher judiciary, Article 124 also talks about the appointment to the higher judiciary in the Supreme Court. So Article 124 states that President shall make Supreme Court judges appointments after consulting the Chief Justice of India and other Supreme Court and High Court judges as he considers necessary. So the appointment shall be made by the President of India. But it is mandatory for the President to consult the Chief Justice of India for appointment as a Supreme Court judge as well as other Supreme Court and High Court judges as he or she may think fit. Similarly, for the appointment to the High Court, the appointment is again made by President, but in this case, the consultation is done or is mandatory as far as Chief Justice of India is concerned, but then you will have Governor and Chief Justice of High Court concerned. So now you can see that the Constitution has clearly given the power to the President as far as appointment is concerned. But President has to consult Chief Justice of India. So what does this consultation means? And how far the consultation done with the Chief Justice of India is mandatory for the President or the government is what has led to a lot of legal debate. Because Article 74 says that President of India shall act on aid and advice of Council of Ministers. It will be unconstitutional for the President to not act on aid and advice of Council of Ministers. But Article 124 says that the Supreme Court judges will be appointed by the President after consultation with Chief Justice of India. And so here is what you have the genesis of a problem of appointment to the higher judiciary. So now everyone can see that the collegium system through which the higher judiciary is appointed is nowhere mentioned in the Constitution of India. And so the aspirants, especially those who are in their initial phases of preparation, are often confused as to where this collegium system has come into play. And for that, we will have to go into the history a little bit. I will just take 3 to 4 minutes to explain that. And the genesis of collegium system can be traced back to Keshwanand Bharti case, which was a landmark judgment which was given by a very, very narrow margin of 7:6, where the Supreme Court delivered its historic verdict which established the doctrine of basic structure to the Constitution of India, which basically means principles and values that cannot be altered by any act of legislature or executive. So of course the verdict was not well received by the government of the day, headed by Indira Gandhi, which viewed it as curtailing the power of the parliament and the government. And so of course there was bound to be a retaliation. And so what followed was a series of unprecedented events. On April 26, 1973, one of the judges who dissented in the Keshwanand Bharti case, Justice A.N. Ray, the person who was against the basic structure doctrine, was promoted to the position of Chief Justice of India. But he was not the senior most judge, because so far the tradition was that the senior most judge of the Supreme Court will automatically become the Chief Justice of India. So his elevation was made possible by superseding 3 more senior judges, all those 3 judges who were in the favor of basic structure of the Constitution. This was a blatant attack on judicial independence by the executive. And so from there, what took off as a legal battle has culminated into 3 judges' case. And these three judges' cases have subsequently restored the independence of the judiciary as far as appointment process is concerned. We will of course reflect upon the demerits of collegium system, but let's just quickly go through the three judges' cases. Before the three judges' case, in 1974, Shamsher Singh versus State of Punjab, Supreme Court held that approval of Chief Justice of India is must in appointing judges of High Court and Supreme Court. Then in 1981, first judge's case or SP Gupta case, Supreme Court ruled that the recommendation made by CJI to the President can be refused for cogent reasons, thereby giving greater say to executive. So now you can see it's all about the interpretation of the consultation. So in 1974, Supreme Court says that consultation means mandatory obligation. In 1981, Supreme Court says that consultation is not binding. Then in 1993, in second judge's case, the Supreme Court held that Chief Justice of India only need to consult two senior most judges over judicial appointments and transfers. However, an objection raised by executive on appointment, collegium may or may not change their recommendation, which is binding on executive. So now you can see that consultation in second judge's case is now starting to mean boundation. Of course, there is a scope of reconsideration, but after reconsidering, if collegium says the same thing, recommends the same name, executive has to follow it. Then in 1998, under third judge's judgment, the Supreme Court ruled that CJI should consult with four senior most Supreme Court judges to form his opinion on judicial appointments and transfers. The recommendation of the Chief Justice of India would be binding on the executive. So the genesis of collegium system can be traced to the second judge's cases, which interpreted the word consultation as concurrence, which was then restated by the third judge's cases. Of course, there were some changes which were made in the way the Chief Justice of India is going to consult the senior most judges, but overall, it has restored the same thing. Now, this became a big problem for the government and the executive, because now they lost almost all the say in the appointment to the higher judiciary. And so to undo that, they came up with National Judicial Appointment Commission and the constitutional amendment, which has again been rejected by the Supreme Court. And so right now the procedure is the same as given in the third judge's case and memorandum of procedure, which was signed a few years ago. So as the things stand today, all the appointments to higher judiciary are being done by a collegium of higher judiciary judges. And there is a lot of problem in that. The problem is just not limited to the constitutionality of the provision, but it also deals with merit, corruption, and nepotism as well. Constitutionality, because when the Constituent Assembly debates were going on, the Assembly deliberately rejected the proposal to vest the Chief Justice with the veto power over appointments. And so something which was debated in the Constitutional Assembly and was rejected, how can it later on become the part of our legal system? Then the next set of problem comes from Article 74, as I have alluded initially. Because Article 74 demands the President to act on aid and advice of Council of Ministers. Article 124 says that President is going to consult Chief Justice of India. The collegium system demands the concurrence of the President with or without aid and advice of Council of Ministers. And so this goes against the basic structure, which is the parliamentary democracy, which requires the President to act only and only on aid and advice of Council of Ministers. Now, Council of Ministers may advise against the consultation of CJI, but that doesn't matter. And so according to 214th Law Commission of India, collegium is a clear violation of Article 74. Then comes the issue of undemocratic nature of the collegium system itself. Because of the way collegium system has operated in past 20 years, it has been very non-transparent and closed to outsiders. And no system of checks and balances have existed, which are an essential part of democracy, and especially for appointments to higher judiciary. Of course, since last 2-3 years, Supreme Court has opened up its collegium system a little bit, but not to the extent which is expected of an institution of such a high dignity. Then there have been numerous cases where people with better qualification and better track records have been sidelined to make way for someone less qualified due to seniority. And so there is a case of ruling over of merit over seniority. Then finally, you have Uncle Judges syndrome. Now these are not my words, but used by Law Commission in its 230th report, which said that nepotism, corruption and personal patronage is prevalent in functioning of the collegium system. Recently, Justice R.M. Lodha made a comment where he said every third High Court judge is an uncle. It is found that within the High Court, relatives are practicing law at the same place. Most of the judges and advocates have blood relation between them. And this is a very serious issue as far as the independence of higher judiciary is concerned. But it's not like higher judiciary has not taken any step. Supreme Court has made way for proceedings of collegium system to be kept in public domain. And this was very correct move and very welcome move. It was an obligation and a moral obligation on higher judiciary to do so. Especially after it struck down the NJAC judgment, it basically became incumbent upon the higher judiciary to do so. Then of course the proactive disclosure by judiciary is in sync with the Right to Information Act as well. Now as far as openness as a value of GS paper 4 is concerned, it not only means openness in the functioning of the executive arm of the state, but also in the judicial apparatus, including judicial appointments and transfers. And finally, the right to know of the citizens. The step strengthens democratic process and fundamental rights of freedom of speech as the right to know as an inherent part of the Constitution, which the secretive collegium system directly violates. So these are the steps which the judiciary has taken, which is very welcome. But now what can be the future course of action? So the first step would be legalizing the collegium system by the government. Law Commission has already recommended that Parliament should pass a law. Now this law should not be exactly the same as the collegium system being followed. It should have an element of transparency, but at the same time, it should ensure primacy of the judiciary in the judicial appointment. Then this new system should ensure independence, accommodate the federal concept of diversity, demonstrate professional competence and integrity. It should also have strict criteria for appointment as a judge of higher judiciary. Eligibility criteria to judge the performance and suitability must be formulated objectively and must be made public. So these are some of the recommendations which will go a long way in ensuring that not only the judiciary is independent, but also the continuous struggle which is going on between judiciary and executive can be put to an end. Let us now move on to the next article. Next article has been sourced from National Page. US sanctions Indian petrochemical company for Iran oil purchases. So in a first such move against oil shipments to India, the US Treasury Department announced it had imposed sanctions against a Mumbai-based petrochemical company among several entities accused of selling Iranian petroleum products. Now if you look at the syllabus of GS paper 2, effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interests is a part of your syllabus. And you can see how decisions taken by US, which means sanctions on people, companies and nations trading with Iran, is impacting India's interest. It is impacting India's